WNST Tap Center downtown Houston. It's called Radio Row, and what's it called? The Fan
Experience, right?
No,
it was at one point.
Fan Gallery. It's the Fan Gallery.
Yeah,
Peanut
something
Gallery.
like that.
Well, there's signs up everywhere. There's a Super Bowl sign behind us as well. Luke Jones rides shotgun today, and dude, it's bad enough you do like 8 straight days in a convention center, but you spent Saturday in the Baltimore Convention Center, and usually the Orioles are out like trying to sign somebody and make a splash and all that, but I guess the splash was the fact that Mark Trumbo had a press conference on Friday, and on Saturday, Adam Jones had some outspokenness. But, you know, I've gotten over Zach Britton being on the edge of the bench, but this was the first time Orioles fans could kind of get together and heal the wounds or whatever it is. And I know, big crowd, right? 15,000 people, right?
Yeah, it was a nice crowd. And whether it was 15,000, I don't know. I mean, crowd estimates are what they are anywhere. But it's
ask the president. There was 1.5 million people there.
But it seemed like more than the last couple of years. And the reason for that, who knows? But there was definitely a buzz. There was definitely some excitement. I think people are realistic as far as seeing what Boston's done, knowing that the Orioles have some obvious flaws.
They're not the favorite.
But at the same time, the Toronto Blue Jays have taken some hits. They lose Edwin Encarnacion, and the Yankees are very young, but there's uncertainty there. So,
boy, they competed last year.
Yeah, they did. But, you know, the Red Sox are the clear favorite on paper at this point. There's no doubt about that after the acquisition of Chris Sale. But I think you still look at this Orioles club and say there's still a lot going for it. There's still some upside there on the pitching front. Can Manny Machado get a little bit better still? I don't know, but
then he'll make more.
2 years ago, I would have said that.
Well, I hope he gets better because when they lose him, I want them to use the excuse that he just was so good we couldn't pay him.
Right. But
I hope they're not rooting for him to hit 265 and 19 bombs.
Well, I don't know about that, but you know, you mentioned Machado. I think there very much is a sentiment that was expressed from a number of players of the urgency, understanding that there's a window. Now, is that window going to shut completely 2 years from now? Who knows? But it's clear they're not going to keep everybody. This
but you know what? They haven't kept everybody. I mean, Wieters, Markakis,
right.
You know, I mean.
But they've been able to keep some of their guys, though.
But they haven't let go of guys that can play. Now, maybe Chris Davis could have gone the other way or whatever. Sure. No one's going to argue that Machado can't play. The Markakis argument, in retrospect, great non-signing, right?
Although Nelson Cruz, you could say,
awful to let him get away. Right.
Yeah, and that was a point Adam Jones even made on Saturday. He was asked about Mark Trumbo, and many players were asked about it. I mean, the press conference was Friday, and certainly the news became official a week before that. But Adam Jones said, we saw what happened when we let Nelson Cruz go. We couldn't let that happen again. Now, is Mark Trumbo going to hit 47 home runs again? I'm guessing not. But it's clear, for better or for worse, the way this team is constructed, they very much are dependent on the long ball. And if that's how you're constructed and you haven't added dynamic on-base percentage, with apologies to Seth Smith, who I think is a nice signing, but he's not going to be a huge difference maker, well, you could do worse than re-signing the home run champion from a year ago. So we'll see how it plays out. I mean, the bullpen is still the clear strength of this club. There's no doubt about that. They're going to hit home runs. They're going to have stretches of the season where they hit the heck out of the ball like they did last June, and they look like the best offense in baseball. And then they're going to have stretches, hopefully not as prolonged as what we saw in the second half.
Where they strike out 18 times in the night like they did here, right?
It's not just the strikeouts.
How many times did they strike out in that game here?
That was
it 18? 19?
Well, the 3-game series, I think it was 52. I think it was a major league record. It was either 52 or 54 off the top of my head.
And you get to visit that place this week.
Well, the interesting thing, one of the storylines about that game, and there were no players who publicly made a lot out of this, but behind closed doors, and there was some sentiment, they had the LED lighting, which they said, some of the Orioles players said
couldn't see the ball.
They weren't picking up the ball. They play one series there a year. You know, I mean, how much of it was that? How much of it is approach? It's some of both, and probably leans a little more towards the Orioles' approach, and we know how that can be. But the interesting thing, Camden Yards is now in the process of switching their lights, and they're having something similar to that. So it'll be very interesting early in the season to see how
what does that
they
do?
adjust.
I mean,
I'm guessing.
I know when I'm in driving behind me, when somebody has different lights.
I don't like that,
dude. I see those.
Doesn't that bug you?
It's the other night I was driving back from Annapolis. I seen a Smithereens. I said to my wife, I said, "This guy's behind me. He's got those damn white
guessing
lights."
They're more powerful, probably a little more environmentally friendly. I'm not sure, but I know they are, and they're in the process. Anyone who went to FanFest, you can see the lights aren't all installed right now. They have empty, the light towers are empty right now. But
when you walk into Camden Yards at 9:15 on a summer night, how is it going to look different?
It's probably going to. To the layman who only goes to 1 or 2 games a year, they might not notice a difference. I guarantee you, I will notice a difference sitting in the press box. It's just a different kind of lighting, and we'll see how it plays out.
This is like inside poker to me, because to me,
I don't know.
Light's a light's a light.
I don't know if it's.
I mean,
you only brought it. I only brought it up because of the whole Houston connection. But getting back to it, we know what the question marks are with this team. It's not terribly different than it's been the last few years.
Same team as last year. I mean, literally, right? I mean,
pretty much.
Maybe where you would say
Giovanni
Bundy
Gallardo
and Gosman.
Gone.
Well, but maybe you think Bundy's going to win 18 games this year and start 34 and have a ERA of 3.2. I mean, he's got the pedigree to maybe be that guy. And certainly this time last year, we're talking about him having pitched 2/3 of an inning in the big leagues.
Yeah, we were talking about how is he going to fit on the roster? How are they going to carry him?
I mean,
because he was out of options.
Far better in the big leagues. For all the hubbub we heard for 4 years about him, not to mention the injury.
No, he's never healthy.
I feel like right now, I'm willing to put $1 in on him being an and not a Jimenez or a mess.
Right.
Not a guy that's going to
make Jimmy Haynes.
Well, I don't think he's going to make 12 starts and be in Norfolk June 3rd because he's 2-9 with
he's
a
out of
6
options
ERA.
for one.
Okay,
right.
but I don't think he's going to be 2-9 with a 7 ERA. I don't think he's going to have that problem. I think of him as being, well, if he kind of stinks, maybe his ERA be 4.2 and he'll be 13-11 or like that. But I think he's going to be better than that. And if you believe he's better than that, and you believe Tillman's okay, and you believe Gosman's on this track to be a big league pitcher.
What we saw in the second half last year.
Right. If you've got
he's a big league
guys.
pitcher. It's a matter of, is he a guy who can be a difference maker? He was a difference maker in the second half last year for stretches. But with Bundy, some interesting developments over the weekend. Buck Showalter said there's no set innings limit. Everyone looks. He was right around. Was it 106 innings, something like that? And the experts tell you with innings progressions, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 to 30 more from the previous year. Buck dismissed that. He basically said, look, there are a lot of people that subscribe to that, but it's a human body. It's not a machine. The human arm can be very volatile, and then there are other guys who throw and throw and throw, and they just stay healthy. And we've seen guys do it for long periods of time. They're gonna take it on a case by case, start by start, pitch count by pitch count basis. Is he feeling good? Last year we didn't really see him go above 90 pitches. That was right around his limit once he got up to that top level.
Well, that makes sense if you have a bullpen too, but you definitely have to prepare around that if you're Buck.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're going to adjust. So there's no the thing that Buck Showalter said is he has enough innings that there's no concern with having him in the starting rotation from the start of the season through the end of the year. So is that 170 innings, 175, 180? I mean, let's be realistic.
It's not 240.
He's not going to have – I'd be really surprised if Dylan Bundy throws 200 innings. If he does, then that's really good for the Orioles.
That would be 30 starts and 7 innings a start, right?
Yeah, yeah. So, but can he get to 165, 170? That would be territory where he's making 30 starts and doing a nice job. And then the thing that he mentioned, and this is what's really interesting as far as his development, he's begun throwing the cutter again, which that was his pitch, coming up through the system. Remember there was the whole Rick Peterson thing and the organizational philosophy about not throwing the cutter until they get to the big league level. He even acknowledged when he had the issue in the Arizona Fall League two falls ago that he was trying to throw the cutter and was starting to feel some forearm discomfort. Stopped it. Didn't use it at all last year. He started to throw it again a little bit as he started his throwing this offseason, and to this point, he's felt good with it. So he acknowledges it's not going to be a pitch that he throws 1 out of every 3 pitches, but if it's another pitch that he can add to his repertoire, makes him that much better. And that everyone always said when he was 18 years old, that was the pitch that was going to make him special. Not just a legitimate major league starter, but to be that guy who knows, could be what Jake Arrieta is now. That might be the pitch that would do it. So be interesting to see how that unfolds. First and foremost, he needs to stay healthy. But, he's clearly a guy that they're counting on. There's no doubt. Does he need to be a guy who has a 3.4 ERA? He probably doesn't have to be that good for the Orioles to be in contention, but he certainly needs to be someone who is making meaningful starts for them, because if not, you just ask yourself, where's it going to come from? Ubaldo, can he give them 12 good starts at some point during the year? Okay, I'll buy that. Do I think he's going to do it for 30 starts? Absolutely not. Same thing for Wade Miley. So you need that consistency from Tillman, Gausman, and you hope Bundy. If they get it from Bundy as well, then you're on to something to have not a great rotation, but I think a rotation that's good enough to keep them in contention.
Well, they're not going to miss Gallardo. That much is obvious.
Yeah, and I even heard people say they've taken away some of their depth. Well, what were you really getting from the guy last year? He came in, velocity was down, shoulder was not strong. He pitched a little bit better at times in the second half of the season, but still not nearly good enough. So, I think there is a question as far as depth. That's why Duquette had mentioned on Saturday earlier in the day about Vance Worley. He ends up signing a minor league deal with the Nats Saturday evening, so that option's out the door. The name that's interesting that's still out there, I don't think he's in play for the Orioles because I still think he's going to command too much money, but Jason Hamill, which the Cubs declined the option. Remember that they were kind of praised for doing that because they were giving this guy a chance to go out on the market, and the market's been really cool on Hamill. And look, he's not a number one starter. He's not a number two starter, but he's a guy that I think fits into the back end.
Everybody needs a 4 or 5.
That's what I'm saying.
You need somebody to take the ball on the 5th day and get me to the 6th inning.
Give me a chance.
Give me a chance to win. And if that's what you have at the bottom, now that's being said that like Gausman and Bundy and Tillman can't be that guy, but somebody has to step up. And the Wade Miley thing's fascinating to me because you throw him out like yesterday's garbage and like last year, but is he going to pitch?
Oh, he's going to be
he's going to start 28 starts,
for right now.
For right now, right?
Until someone gets hurt or they add someone or who knows what happens. But yeah, it's so they'll probably add another pitcher, probably on a minor league deal, another Vance Worley type. Sure. That's what I'm guessing you'll see them add at some point here over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
He didn't sign anywhere yet, has he?
Worley signed with the Nats. Saturday
this
night.
Weekend. Oh,
minor league deal.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, minor league deal.
New to me.
Yeah, and Duquette.
On a minor league deal, why wouldn't the Orioles do that?
That's what's surprising. Now, Duquette said that they had interest in him. They had made him an offer. You wonder if maybe Worley's looking
Confederate money.
Well, I don't know if it's so much that anymore.
Confederate money, it is.
But, maybe Worley probably profiles better as a National League guy, if we're being totally honest. I'm not sure he's cracking the Nats rotation by any means.
I liked him more than I liked most of these names.
Worley was good.
Yeah,
for what he was. Well, let me rephrase it.
For when we say what he was, if you go through the lineage of...
I'd take that as,
how many, Bud Norrises and how many of those guys that have been through... I would have gone back to him for another cup of coffee when you consider all the Mattises and all all the names we've been through around here.
And even beyond the starting rotation part of this, the role that he didn't make that many starts last year. It was only a handful of starts that he made, but he was so valuable in a long relief role. And I know the Orioles have had this mindset.
You needed long relief when you were sending Jimenez and Gallardo out there.
You do, but the Orioles have had this mindset, and we've seen this with the T.J. McFarlands, Mike Wright, Tyler Wilson.
You're giving me a bunch of names. There you
Dana
go.
Evelyn a few years back.
Sure.
They had these guys that they would rotate in, and okay, so-and-so gives me 4 innings, and then I'll send them out, and I'll bring up a fresh arm. Well, the problem with that is those 4 innings need to be at least mediocre. It can't be that you're giving up 6 runs and you can't even make it through a couple innings. Vance Worley pitched in some blowouts, yes, but he also pitched in some games that a starter was knocked out early, and it was still a close game, and he gave them a chance to win. As much as he doesn't give you flexibility with being able to option him to the minor leagues, and I know they ideally want to have that guy, that revolving door, so to speak, it's easier said than done. And we saw plenty of guys last year, who came up for long relief, mop-up kind of roles, and they couldn't even get through 2 innings. So, he's a guy that I think had more value than the Orioles. Maybe the Orioles viewed. I understand non-tendering him for what he was going to make in arbitration, but at the same time, that's still a question mark. You look at that long relief role. Yeah, they have some guys who can fill that role. I think Tyler Wilson could be okay in that role. They brought back Logan Verrett, who was a previous Rule 5 pick of theirs, was with the Mets. They have Mike Wright, T.J. McFarland, who is out of option, so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out for him. But none of those options really scream to you, yeah, that's the guy I want as my long reliever that I feel can do a nice job. I think those are a bunch of maybes right now. And
well, there's more arms that are coming in, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have their own versions of Vance Worley's from last year.
Yeah, I
right?
mean, and they'll inevitably bring in a couple guys.
And somebody will pitch well in March. Somebody.
Yeah, I mean.
Well, it was Worley last year, right? He kind of earned his way onto the team, right?
Well, if you remember how some other guys are pitching last spring, Miguel Gonzalez being one of them, even though I wouldn't have let him go. But,
how many times are we going to bring that up this year? Depends on how he starts a year.
Yeah. I mean, look, do I think the Orioles would have been dramatically better with Miguel Gonzalez last year in the rotation compared to guys would that have been worth? I'll say this.
But you wouldn't have wanted him in April and May. You were waiting for him to get healthy is what you would have wanted him in July.
If they had Miguel Gonzalez, they're hosting that wild card game at the very least, and they're not at Toronto. I think it's fair to at least say that, right?
Then if they would have had a lead, they could have brought Zach.
Well, maybe it plays out a little differently.
Right, exactly. Luke Jones joining us here. We're at Super Bowl 51. We're on Radio Row. You know how we were at the Super Bowl? We have the sign. It says so here. That's Tom Brady.
Even though we're talking baseball.
That's fine. I mean,
I'm okay with that.
That's fine. We'll talk football all week. We got to do one baseball. So while we're on the baseball thing, because I don't think we're going to talk a lot of baseball this week, quite frankly, so we're getting that out of the way here early. We talk about the pitching, and I know Adam Jones talked to you and talked to the media in regard to how the defense relates to the pitching. And as much as they're going to hit a lot of home runs, the pitching, we're going to cross our fingers, and the bullpen, you hope that in the sixth inning if they have a lead, they can hold those leads. One of the real issues here is how the defense relates to the pitching and the fact that they don't strike guys out, that the ball does get put in play, and that Buck, from the time he got here, was defense, defense, defense. That's what Hardy and the middle and strong up the middle and all of that. Best defensive team they had in years, 3 years ago?
2014.
There you go, 4
Exceptional
seasons ago now. That's not going to happen this year. I mean, we sort of know where we are defensively.
Well, I think the infield defense is going to be good.
Fair enough.
There's no doubt about that. I mean, does J.J. Hardy have the same range that he had 3-4 years ago? No, but he's still a plus defender. We know Manny Machado, gold-gloved defender at third base.
Will Machado be a shortstop, do you think, when he signs with the Yankees?
You know, it's such a fascinating question. I'm guessing he will because that's where the value will really lie with him.
That's why you're going to want to pay him $35
million. But at the same time, we don't know how great of a shortstop he can be defensively. I think he's played there enough, and we saw it for 6 weeks last year when Hardy breaks his foot, fouls a ball off his foot. But we didn't see him play at an elite level at shortstop.
Deep down, he wants to be a shortstop.
He wants to be a shortstop.
Right.
There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, this is a guy who has a chance. Once Adrian Beltre is finally gone, this is a guy who has a chance to win 10 Gold Gloves at third base over the next 12 years. It's all gonna depend on who signs him. Alex Rodriguez was a perfectly good shortstop. Goes to the Yankees. Well, they had a shortstop. What they do? They move him to third base. So it's all going to depend where he winds up and what the needs are there. But getting back to your point about the defense, the infield looks fine. The outfield defense, and this is something that I talked to you about a ton last year. This is something that Dan Duquette talked about at the end of last season as far as being a need. They have very marginally upgraded in right field with Seth Smith projected to play most of the time in right field rather than Mark Trumbo. Seth Smith's an average defender. Mark Trumbo below average in right field. But Adam Jones mentioned it a few times. And from a PR standpoint, from a perception standpoint, probably not a great look on his part. But he's just saying what we've all observed the last couple of years.
We watched the games.
I love Hyun-Soo Kim as a hitter. I love his approach at the plate. He generally will catch everything he gets to.
By the way, it's going to be fascinating to see baseball catch up to him, right? I mean, because he really by July and August got incredibly comfortable in a way that he wasn't in March and April.
Sure.
Obviously, he wasn't, right? I'm fascinated what the sophomore thing looks like for him at the major league level, where you're looking at him and say, we're going to give him 450 at-bats this
Yeah.
year, right? I mean, last year, Buck didn't want to give him one at-bat in the big leagues.
Well, and then even late in the year.
In March, I'm talking
even
about.
Late in the year, he was being pinch hit for by Nolan Rymel
what
against
happens?
lefties.
Yeah, what happens?
Well, I mean, I think, with Kim, I mean, defensively, he catches what he gets to, but he's limited in range.
He's no Ichiro.
He's not going to he's not going to cover a lot of ground out there, so that's a problem. I think it's going to be interesting to see, does he become a guy who starts to get more at bats against left-handed pitching, or does he settle into a platoon with Joey Rickard, who I think Joey Rickard is not an everyday player, but I think he's a guy who hits left-handed pitching really well, fits in really nicely as a fourth outfielder and a platoon partner. So does that become the platoon, or does Kim establish himself as being able to hit left-handed pitching, which in Korea he had okay numbers. It wasn't as though he never hit left-handed pitching. He was kind of up and down.
I got to think a left-hander in Korea and a left-hander in the big leagues is really, really different.
Yeah, well, I mean, the biggest difference, and he even reiterated this, so we talked to him on Saturday via his interpreter, but the velocity in the major leagues compared to what he saw in Korea. The average fastball there, 88, 87, and I don't even know if it'd be average, but most guys were kind of in that range. Kind of what you thought of baseball to be 30 years ago.
Sure.
Ago. Whereas
Scott McGregor.
Whereas in this day and age, I mean, starting pitcher velocity, it's incredible. I mean, all these guys throw hard. So, that was the big adjustment for him. Now the next thing, what you alluded to, how do major league opposition, how do they adjust to him? How does he readjust? How does he potentially hit against left-handed pitching? He was, 0 for 18, 0 for 19 last year. It's such a small sample. I don't know if you can definitively say he's not going to be a guy who can hit left-handed pitching, but it's going to be interesting because if he can become an everyday player, then that keeps Mark Trumbo potentially out of right field. Seth Smith plays against righties. Joey Rickard maybe plays right field against left-handed pitching. So, you make your defense a little bit better there.
You'd rather have Trumbo be the DH, but
yes.
would he rather be the DH? Does he
want
to grab a glove once a week and go out there and play when he's already not very good?
Mark Trumbo's a gamer. I've talked to you about this a lot. He's a guy who, and he even said this during his press conference on Friday, if there had been a competitive offer that was right there with what the Orioles were offering and the Orioles were offering a little bit less, he said he would have taken it. And I actually would have believed him because he was that comfortable. But I think in a perfect world, he'd probably like to play first base. But, Chris Davis is a Gold Glove caliber guy there, so he understands that. He accepts that. I think
Davis is going to play 135, 140 games at first base, right?
And we know the history of Buck Showalter tells us that Mark Trumbo's not going to DH 162 games. Buck's going to find a way to keep him engaged. That's a big word that Buck likes to use, keeping players engaged, changing things up a little bit, not wanting a guy to sit on the bench for too long. In this case, be a DH for too long. So, you'll see Davis spelled a little bit here and there. I think you'll see Trumbo play at least against some left-handed starters in right field. And we'll see how that plays out. But, getting back to the point, I mean, Adam Jones isn't getting any younger. He's going to be 32 in August. And, a lot of the defensive metrics, which have, in fairness, have never been extremely kind to him as far as rating him as an outfielder, rating him as a center fielder. But, last year was a rough year for him. But how much of that was him slowing down and how much of that was he's looking to his right and he sees Hyun-Soo Kim in left field. He's looking to his left and he sees Mark Trumbo in right field. And he's thinking, my goodness, I need to go get everything.
I'm going to play a third of his position and a third of his position.
And it was almost out of necessity. At the same time, you need him out there. I mean, the outfield defense isn't good to begin with.
You're going to put Joey Rickard in center for a week and a half. You don't want to do that.
If you want to put Joey Rickard out there for, once every 2 weeks, fine. I mean, that's, Joe. I think Rickard could be acceptable out there, but, it's not good right now.
But Adam Jones isn't going to play 155 games this year.
I think he'd like to.
Well, I tell you what, Buck plays the guys like rented mules, so maybe I'm wrong.
And that's something that I've talked to you about a lot over the last couple of years. They did a little bit better job with that with Hardy this past year. I think they need to. Jones is entering that territory.
I'm sure Wieters at this point thinks that the Orioles cost him a lot of money, right? I mean, literally. I mean, it's not like they showcased him in the best light for free agency twice now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's two ways of looking at it. You could say that.
Has he caught on with the Expos yet, or the Durham Bulls?
There were some rumors over the weekend.
It's crazy.
I guess the Brewers, but how much of that is Scott Boras too? How many times have we seen that story where he has a client that's still out there in late January, February, and by the way, still gets him a long-term deal and still ends up getting him a decent deal. So who that team is, I don't know. I know some Orioles players.
It's all a mystery to us.
Some Orioles players were talking about, hey, never say never with Wieters. I'd be very surprised by that. I don't think that'd be the best allocation of resources at this point. I think Wellington Castillo is going to be fine. They hope Chance Sisco either some point this year or next year.
Well, dollar on dollar, Castillo's perfect, right? For them, for what they wanted to do. Because they really wanted to give their money to Chris Davis. They want to give their mony to Mark Trumbo. They'd love to give their money to Machado. I don't know that that's really the case, but you'd rather spend that kind. I mean, he wasted a lot of money on Matt Wieters last. I mean, no offense, but like, the reason he signed for $16 million, no one else was going to give him that money, right?
Well, I mean, he took the qualifying offer. Yeah, it's that simple. I mean, a 1 year, and you always hear this in any sport.
On the open market, though, on the open market, what would Matt Wieters have gotten last year on a 1 year deal last year? It would have looked like Nelson Cruz. He would have gotten $6 or $7 million.
I think he would have got a little more than that, but not much more. Yeah,
right. So they overpaid him by $10 million last year. Kind of, sort of.
Part of that was. There were
qualifying offer.
Well, there was some tug of war within the organization. There were a lot of people who didn't think he would take it because remember at that point
no one had taken
one, and then 3 guys ended up taking it. He being one of them. But there was never an expectation that he was going to accept that based on what most people thought, and then he took it. And you have no choice then. It's
and then you expanded your payroll by $16 million.
Yeah. So, but at the same time,
Mr. A probably didn't like that.
But at the same time, it was it's a 1 year contract. You say that in any sport. There's really no such thing as a bad 1 year contract. Even with the Orioles, the way that they've handled their finances, I don't think that sets them back for years.
It worked out well because Caleb Joseph could have been the answer and wasn't the answer last year. So
and who knows?
In retrospect, they made the playoffs. In retrospect, they had a chance to win. They could have won the World Series. They could have. So I'm not here to urinate on their 2016 season, but I'm here to try to figure out what 17's looking like. And you spent the day at FanFest. I mean, anything else come out of it or strike you as being interesting or fascinating about it? I think the Hardy thing is interesting to me from a health standpoint. I think Scope's fascinating as, can he hit 30 home runs this year? Can he strike out less? Is he going to become that guy, an all-star guy? Not Joe Morgan, but not Craig Biggio, whose bar is about 20 feet away from here, but a guy that's going to get $100 million.
Be nice if he had that kind of plate discipline, but but he is one of those guys that you look to right now. To continue to expect Manny Machado to get better. At this point, it's tough to ask that.
Yeah.
It's tough to ask that. You just hope he stays healthy and productive.
But it's tough to ask Trumbo and Chris Davis to have career years when they've had that kind of a career year. I mean, if Davis goes out and hits 32 home runs and bats .210 again this year, it's not a very good year for the amount of money they've given him.
It is interesting you mentioned Davis because remember he was dealing with the hand issue last year. It turned out it was a dislocated thumb that he had suffered and kind of played through it and admitted in retrospect probably should have sat down. But was playing good defense, was still a guy who still, it's not as though he was terrible last year, just wasn't what he was the year before. So, if he's healthy, if Mark Trumbo doesn't hit 47 but still hits 36, let's say, I think that would be a reasonable expectation. If Manny Machado does what you expect him to do.
Well, they didn't pay him to hit 47 either. The market the market thought he was going to hit 28 to 30. But the market thinks he's going to strike out 180 times. The market thinks he has no position, right?
He's not a high on base guy. I mean it's for what he's 3 years, $37.5 million for this day and age.
That's as good a deal as they've ever gotten on a player of his caliber. Now, how it turns out remains to be seen. Yeah, that's why we play the games.
So it's there are a lot of ifs with this team, but that's no different than the previous 4 years and. They've been successful. They haven't gotten to the top, but they've been successful. I mean, this team, since the start of 2012, more wins than any other team in the American League. And now they haven't gotten to the top of the mountain. And interestingly enough, Buck Showalter said, we understand at this point that it's not good enough to just get to the playoffs. We need to do better than that. And can they do that? I think that's a big question, and that we know that. We think that window is closing based on the reality of free agency and where they're heading over the next couple years. But
it might be opening if Bundy and Gaussman become front of the line rotation guys.
There you go.
If that's real, if those guys are real and they're going to be 15, 18 game kind of winners and stay healthy.
Chris Tillman gives you what Chris Tillman's been over the last 4 years, then you
don't need Trumbo to hit 40 home runs. You need them to catch the ball.
And by the way,
behind the pitchers.
You get into the tournament, you get into the postseason, and you don't need 5 starters at that point. We've seen that very clearly. I feel like
Toronto's going to be out of the way this year. So that
I don't know.
Boston's going to be way in the way.
Yeah, Boston's clearly the favorite. I think Toronto did a nice job bringing back Jose Bautista. I think that's something they had to do at this point. They're interesting. They added Steve Pearce. They've changed up their lineup a little bit.
We didn't need Bautista. Our fans didn't want him.
That's still one of the dumbest things. Look,
I'm not making that up. I'm just saying what Dan Duquette said.
There were plenty of legitimate reasons not to want Jose Bautista, but to say it's because your fans don't like him, come on, man. But Toronto, I think, is still a formidable team, though. I think that's still a tough lineup. I think they still have some starting pitching that we talked about last year that was much better than most people expected. So they're still a team that's going to be there. To me, the Yankees are the big wild card here. I think there's an expectation because so many of their young players like Sanchez, came on the scene and were so impressive, and they were still in the wild card race into the last week or two of the season. But young guys, we've seen this. How many teams have you seen come out of nowhere? The Houston Astros are a perfect example of this. 15, look at what they did. Made it to the playoffs, had a nice little run. Then what happened last year? A little bit of a setback. Maybe in 2015, maybe they were ahead of schedule.
Well, it puts you in the hole when you stink in April and May, too.
It does.
If you stink in April and May, it's hard to make that up.
If the Yankees get off to a slow start, does that get into the head of some of those young players? So, they're a team that I think they're in the mix. I think at this point, Tampa Bay is they are what they are at this point. I don't think they're going to be very good.
I keep thinking they're going to pitch,
as much as I've been a guy that would pick them, even the most recent years to be in the mix when others didn't think. I kind of think that ship has sailed, at least for the time being. I think it's clearly Boston's division to win at this point on paper. It's a big if. That there have been a couple other years over the last 5-6 years where Boston had high expectations and they fell flat. So you never know, but that's a team with a lot of good young talent in that lineup. Really, really scary starting pitching, especially from the left-handed side, which, by the way, not good news for the Orioles. Another lefty in this division, given the way that they struggled against southpaw pitching last year. But I think there's enough talent there. I think the bullpen, the power, the big question marks with the young starting pitchers, I think it at least adds up to the Orioles being interesting this year. And I expect them to be in the mix until the end. Does that mean they'll get in? Not necessarily, but I don't expect this team to be.
I expect it to be a real season.
Yeah,
I'm not September when the Ravens are kicking off, and when we're going over to London, ends in September. I'm expecting the Orioles to be relevant in September. I don't see a sell-off of Machado on July 31st because they're 14 games under 500.
Yeah,
I don't think that's going to happen.
I would be surprised if it's a 75 and 87 kind of year. To me, a lot would have to go wrong, meaning injuries. So we'll see how it plays out. They're clearly deficiencies on this team, the outfield defense being one of those. Clear Adam Jones isn't thrilled about that.
On-base percentage is a deficiency.
Yeah, but they hit home runs. They have still one of the best, if not the best, bullpen in the American League. And that's those two things alone and really good infield defense. As much as we've beaten up the outfield, infield defense still really good. Those three strengths can take you a long way. Don't know if it can take you all the way. I'm guessing probably can't take you all the way, but those three things should keep you in the race.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter. And a little inside poker here. We're at Houston, George R. Brown Convention Center. I'm going to find out what the R is for. It's a Super Bowl 51. We're at the Fan Gallery. Luke is so obsessed with baseball that he reached for the Cracker Jack on the media. It's true. There
we go.
Buy him some peanuts and Cracker Jack. He is an original. It's Luke Jones. You can find him, Baltimore Luke. I am Nestor Aparicio on Twitter. Together we're at WNST and WNST.net. We're going to be here all week at Super Bowl 51 on Radio Row. We're going to have people more famous and better looking than us on the set. You'll want to check it out on Facebook Live as well as on our YouTube WNSTV channel. And, of course, our morning newspaper delivers to your email inbox at 7 a.m. each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness. It'll have all our videos, all of Luke's work, all of the box score standings, and all that Pro Bowl stuff that you want to tear into this week. It's going to be all Tom Brady and Matt Ryan here this week. And you can find me, nasty at WNST.net. We're on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. A little bit of baseball, might sneak a little hockey and Terps in this week, but primarily it's football. We're down here in Houston doing our Super Bowl thing for the 23rd consecutive year. We're on Radio Row. I'm Nestor. This is WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.